Picture yourself in a room. A stranger in a white lab coat tells you to press a button. You press it. He tells you to press it again. You press it again. He tells you to keep going. And you do. Even when the person on the other side of the wall starts screaming. You are not a monster. You are not cruel. You are just human. That is the terrifying part. In 1961, a psychologist named Stanley Milgram set up what looked like a straightforward memory experiment at Yale University. Participants were told they were helping test whether punishment improved learning. They sat in front of a large machine covered in switches. Each switch delivered an electric shock to a learner in the next room. The shocks ranged from 15 volts, labeled slight shock, all the way to 450 volts, labeled simply XXX. The learner was an actor. The shocks were fake, but the participants did not know that. Every time the learner gave a wrong answer, the experimenter instructed the participant to increase the shock by 15 volts. When participants hesitated, the experimenter said 4 words in sequence. Please continue. The experiment requires that you continue. It is absolutely essential that you continue. You have no other choice, no threats, no weapons, just a calm voice and a white coat. Before Milgram ran the experiment, he asked psychiatrists to predict the results. They said less than 1% of participants would go all the way to 450 volts. They said only the most sadistic fringe of the population would ever hurt someone simply because they were told to. They were wrong. 65% of participants delivered the maximum shock. 65% of ordinary American adults, people who had families and jobs and neighbors they liked, kept pressing that button while a stranger screamed in the next room because a man in a lab coat told them to. Your brain does not process authority the way you think it does. You believe you weigh instructions rationally. You believe you would push back. You believe you are different. But your brain evolved in a world where following the hierarchy kept you alive. The elder who knew where the water source was. The leader who knew when the predators were coming. Questioning authority was not a virtue in the ancient world. It was a liability. Researcher Herbert Kelman identified what he called agentic shift. When you are placed in a system with a clear authority figure, something changes in your mind. You stop seeing yourself as the agent of your own actions. You become an instrument of someone else's will. Your moral reasoning does not disappear. It transfers. You tell yourself the person in charge is responsible. You tell yourself you are just following the plan. You tell yourself this must be right because he would not ask you to do something wrong. Your ancestors did the same thing around the campfire. The tribe leader spoke. The tribe moved. That reflex is still running in your nervous system right now. Milgram replicated his experiment 18 different ways. He changed the location. He changed the race and gender of participants. He moved it off Yale's campus to strip away the institutional prestige. Obedience dropped, but it never disappeared. Even in the most stripped-down version of the experiment, a significant portion of participants still followed orders all the way. What changed obedience most was proximity. When participants could see the learner through a glass window, compliance dropped sharply. When they had to physically hold the learner's hand against the shock plate, it dropped further. Distance is the key ingredient. When you cannot see the consequence of your action, your brain finds it much easier to continue. This is not ancient history. Researcher Philip Zimbardo spent decades studying how ordinary people commit extraordinary harm inside institutions. His conclusion was blunt. Any of us, placed in the wrong system with the wrong authority structure and the wrong distance from consequences, is capable of following orders that cause suffering. This is not a flaw in a few bad people. It is a feature of the human mind, designed for a world that no longer exists. And yet the world keeps building the same systems. Bureaucracies, corporate chains of command, platforms where policies replace people, algorithms that process decisions without a human face attached. Every layer of distance between you and the outcome of a decision makes it easier to comply, to delegate, to move forward without feeling responsible. You see this in yourself in small ways every day. You stay quiet in a meeting when your manager says something you know is wrong. You follow a process at work even though you can see it is hurting someone. You do not speak up because someone above you approved this, and surely They have considered the implications. You hand the responsibility up the chain. You become an instrument. Milgram's participants were not blindly obedient. Many of them were visibly distressed. They sweated. They trembled. Some laughed in discomfort. Some asked the experimenter to stop. But most of them kept pressing the button anyway. Feeling uncomfortable and stopping are two entirely different things. Your conscience can be screaming, and your hand can still move toward the switch. The researchers who came after Milgram spent years trying to find what made the minority of participants refuse. What gave them the ability to stop? The answer was almost always the same. A prior commitment to an external value that outranked the authority in the room. A religious conviction. A professional ethical code. A deeply personal experience of seeing someone harmed by blind compliance. Something that existed before they walked into that room and held more weight for them than the man in the white coat. In other words, the people who stopped had already decided what they would and would not do before the authority figure appeared. That is the thing Milgram's experiment really revealed. Not that humans are broken, not that obedience is evil, but that the decision about when you will and will not comply is not made in the moment. It cannot be. By the time you are sitting in front of that machine, the agentic shift has already begun. The hierarchy is already around you. The momentum is already moving. The decision has to be made before the room. You think you would have walked out of Milgram's experiment. Most people do. That certainty is part of the problem. Because tonight, or tomorrow, or sometime next week, you will be in a room. Someone with authority will ask you to press a button. And the real question is not whether you will hesitate. The real question is what you decided before you walked in. That switch is always there. The only thing that changes is who you were before you sat down.
वीडियोस बनाने हैं, फिल्मोरा है ना।